Our movie begins with Casey, who works as an accountant in a company. We notice that he is a little isolated from others because he is an introverted type, and this causes him a lot of problems, including his friend at work, who makes fun of him a lot and works to harass him because he causes a reduction in the salaries of the rest of his colleagues at work. Kathy lives alone in her house with her small puppy at home. Only Kathy went to make food for the dog, but when he got there, he noticed that the dog's food had expired, so he went to the grocery to acquire more food. Kathy saw two young men on motorcycles on the way to the grocery, and one of them asked him if he had a weapon, to which Kathy replied, surprised, that he did not. Casey arrived at the supermarket and brought food, but on his way back, some masked men appeared to him and ran after him to attack him. Casey tried to escape and save his life, but unfortunately the youth managed to reach him, and here they began to brutally beat him until he lost consciousness and stole his property. Kathy awoke from her coma in the hospital the next day, and when he returned home, he was quite upset and went to see if any messages had reached him to check on his health, but none had, except for his manager at work, who told him that he could obtain an extended vacation due to his health. Casey found no word from anyone to reassure him. Kathy sat at his house after that, and he gradually became more terrified of himself. He had the idea to buy a weapon while watching a movie on TV so that he could protect himself against any attack. The next day, Casey went to a gun store to acquire one, and after several options, the store owner responded that he could not obtain a gun at this time before submitting a request to divulge his criminal past. Kathy saw a karate club on his way back, and there Kathy stood staring from afar and observed a man training the exercisers in a lovely way. Kathy entered the location and decided to wait for that coach. When he arrived, Kathy asked him if he could join them, and the coach replied that he could come to the free class tomorrow and, if he liked it, he could join. The next day, Casey went to the club, and there she saw the only girl in the place, who called Anna was training some youngsters, but in a slightly fierce way. Casey went to talk to her, but she was very strict with him and told him it was the rule of the place to take off his shoes while walking on the mat. Kathy then begins training in the dojo and earns a white belt as a beginner. He encounters Henry in the dressing room, who appears to be friendly with Kathy. The two converse, and we learn that Henry has a blue belt but wishes to obtain a black belt. Casey's first training session began shortly after, and Tennis arrived to practice striking with her feet. Tennis initially knocked Casey down with a hard kick, but Casey would not give up and tried to enhance his defense by kicking back. Casey questioned him in the coach's office about why he joined the club and wanted to learn how to fight, but Casey kept the facts hidden and told him he merely wanted to stay fit. Casey continued to exercise and work on himself over time. For some time, and at the end of the week, Henry met Casey and told her that he had heard that the coach might choose him to give him a black belt, as he had dreamed. But at the distribution ceremony, the coach talked to the students a little about the older teacher who was killed with a gun, and he told them that anyone who uses weapons in self-defense is nothing but a coward. The trainer completes his speech and tells the students about a combat technique that no one knew except for the great teacher, which is to use only one finger to kill the opponent. After that, the trainer distributes the belts and gives Casey the yellow belt for his progress in the exercise. On the other hand, Henry expected to get a black belt, but unfortunately, the coach granted the belt to another person named Tom. Thus, everyone discovered that the coach was teaching some students in night classes, and that raised their level. Casey returned home, pleased with his yellow belt, and he proceeded to develop himself further as his confidence grew. Then one day Casey was shopping for a while, and as he was leaving, a man stopped him and mocked him after he hit his car, and when Casey tried to apologize, the men reprimanded and punched him. Kathy was crying on the way because he was unable to defend himself in front of the man and lacked the guts to do so, despite having earned a yellow belt. Kathy's self-esteem plummeted as a result, and his performance in the battle suffered as a result. The coach observed this and invited Kathy to speak with him about why she joined the group in the first place. Kathy told him the truth about the young men who had attacked him. She also informed him that he was terrified of persons larger than him. His motivation for learning to fight is to defend himself and exact revenge on those who have beaten him. After hearing this, the coach advised him that his decision to join the club was correct and that he needed to conduct psychological as well as physical training to develop himself. The coach continued his speech and advised Casey to hear loud music better than quiet music in order to change his reactions, and asked him to learn the German language instead of French because the German language contains a stronger thinking system. Finally, he asked him to deal sharply and intelligently with each person and invited him to attend night classes to practice with the rest of the students. Indeed, Casey implemented all of these tips and began to deal with work in a different and more assertive way, until he hit his manager and mocked his coworker, who was working to harass him a lot. With this, Casey begins to earn the respect of others, despite losing his job afterwards. But Kathy continued to implement the coach's advice, stopped playing with his little dog to get stronger, and went to night classes. One day, Henry went to night training without the coach's permission, and he was unhappy with Casey because he thought Casey had betrayed him by not inviting him to training, for example. Around that time, the coach asked Henry to assist him in explaining a special combat practice, but the instructor broke Henry's arm as punishment for attending night training without his permission. At home, the coach called Casey and said he had seen one of the persons who had beaten him up in the pub, and when Casey went there, the coach pointed him out. Indeed, Casey followed the man, but he found him very drunk and decided to leave, but the coach insisted that Casey take revenge. So Kathy went to the man and punched him in the stomach until he fell to the ground. Unfortunately, it turned out that this man was not one of the people who beat Casey before, and thus Casey discovered that the coach was filming and deceiving him. Kathy arrived home and discovered his dog laying on the ground, so she took him to the hospital and was concerned about him. Regrettably, the doctor informed him that the dog died after being punched in the chest, although the dog was able to bite the criminal before dying. Casey was devastated by the death of his only buddy and was convinced that the coach was responsible. Casey went to the club the next day and disobeyed some rules in order to provoke the instructor. When he arrived, Casey informed him that he had killed his dog, but the coach denied the matter, and here Casey was very upset and yelled at the coach and told him that he would leave the place and was about to quarrel with him. But the coach blackmailed him with the video he had of him, and thus Casey had to stay in the club forever. Casey got very angry and tried to hit the coach, but to no avail. The next day, Casey attended the night training, but this time it was different, as the coach asked Casey, Tom, and Anna to go on a mission to beat up a person. There, I tried to talk to a man and hit him without knowing that he was a policeman, and he had a weapon, so the policeman shot Anna and hit her in the foot. Fortunately, Casey was able to attack the policeman, beat him up, and eventually managed to kill him. Back at the club, the coach reprimanded Anna for attacking the man before asking him if he had a gun or not. And it turns out that this is what had happened before with Casey when he was attacked by the guys. Casey delivered Anna on the way, and there she told him that she had also killed one of the men in the club when he tried to rape her because she was the only woman in the place. Then I praised Kathy for the delivery, and at the conclusion I requested him not to return to the club, which increased Kathy's reservations about the club and the coach. Casey returned to the club to investigate the coach's death, and in his office he discovered a spot to burn the bodies, and he was astonished to find Henry's body there after he was killed by his belt. Casey was saddened by that, then continued his search until he found videotapes, and one of them bore his name, and when he watched it, he discovered that the young men who attacked him were Coach, Anna, and Tom, and Casey learned that the coach is doing this to control people's lives. Then the coach returned to the place and burned Henry's body. The next day, Casey went to the coach and confronted him with the truth. He also told him that he had learned that he was blackmailing students into paying him money. Then Casey challenged the coach to a fight to the death, and the coach agreed because he knew that he would win. Indeed, both Casey and the coach were prepared for the fight, and when the battle began, Casey showed a weapon and shot and killed the trainer. And in the morning, the students gathered in front of Casey, who told them that he is the strongest now after he killed the coach with the finger technique. Then he asked them to extend their hands to find out which of them killed his dog. Indeed, he found traces of a bite on Tom's hand and thus discovered that he had killed his little dog. Then Casey brought his new dog, which he had trained in the German language, and ordered him to kill Tom in front of everyone in revenge for his dog. In the end, Casey was awarded the black belt because I appointed her as the main coach of the club, and she decided to train everyone for noble goals only. And so our movie ends. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and press the like button to receive all new updates.